Welcome to Introduction to Subtitling. I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes because it takes a while for everybody to get access. So I wouldn't want to start before everybody was ready. My name's Lindsay Bywood and this is Introduction to Subtitling. How marvellous to see so many people here. While everybody's coming in, hello, it's nice to see everybody's hellos in the chat. As I said, my name is Lindsay Bywood. I work at the University of Westminster. I'm a trained subtitler and this session is Introduction to Subtitling. It's fabulous to see people from all over the world joining our webinar. Still a few more people. A special hello to Alina from Luxembourg, which is where my family live. Goodness me, it's actually really nice if you can put where you're from in the chat. It's great to see all those people from all over the world. London Coney, just up the road. Okay, I think everybody that wants to be here is now here. So I'm going to make a start. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. I am here on my own. The last session I was in, there were 4 of us, but this one is just me. So there are 3 ways of interacting in these sessions for anyone that hasn't done one before. You can raise your hand, which I can promise you I will not respond to. However, I will probably ask you to raise your hand. I'm going to ask some questions. Yeah, I see your hands. So I will ask you to raise your hand at some point because I've got some questions. I'd like to see how many people do certain things. So it's going to be like a poll. But otherwise, I can't respond to raised hands. I'll also probably won't be able to moderate the chat because I'll be talking. So don't ask me questions in the chat. But what I can do is answer questions in the Q&A. So there's a Q&A box. And what I'm going to do is I'm definitely going to leave space at the end for Q&A. But also, hopefully, if I see questions that are specific to what I'm talking about, I will try and answer them. But it's going to be a little bit of a juggling act. So we'll see how we get on. Okay, so this is Introduction to Subtitling. As I say, my name is Dr. Lindsay Bywood. I am a senior lecturer at the University of Westminster. I trained as a subtitler, I trained as a translator actually, and then I trained as a subtitler subsequent to that. And I worked for many years in various subtitling companies. Okay. So what we're going to do today, hopefully we can fit it all in, is we're going to look at what is subtitling, where do we see subtitling, so where is subtitling in the world around us, and I'm going to ask for your input there. Who does subtitling and how do we do it? That'll be a very high level overview because I don't have time to do a hugely detailed overview, but I'll give you an idea. And how you can work in the industry, which I'm sure is of interest to many of you. And I'm hoping to allow at least 15 minutes at the end for questions, because I'm sure that there will be some questions. I can already see that somebody has asked about slides. So there's going to be a recording which you can access afterwards. I'm happy to send you my slides, but you'll need to email me for them. I don't think there's going to be a sort of mass mailing out of slides. I'm not 100% sure because I'm not involved in the organisation of the event. Yeah, I'm happy for you to email me to request the slides afterwards. My email address is on the previous slide. Or you can Google me because I have quite an unusual surname and I will come up as the first if you Google me. Okay, so what is subtitling? Well, we know what subtitling is, right? We all now are quite familiar with this practice of the lines of text on the bottom of the screen, or what my children call the annoying lines of text on the bottom of the screen, and always ask me to switch them off. And then I tell them that that's what pays for their Netflix subscription, so they should not switch them off. So subtitling is the lines of text on the bottom of the screen. But subtitling is also an academic discipline. It's something that we teach in universities, and it's a skill. It's a skill that has to be learned. It's an additional skill to any kind of translation skills that you might have. And it has an academic definition, which is quite long. I've highlighted the main parts, but I'll leave you to just read that. Okay, so that's the an academic definition of subtitling. There are more. So this is over to you now. Having said that I didn't want you to use the chat to talk to me, I'm going to ask you to use the chat now. So where do we see subtitling? So if you can type in the chat for me, in what places or where do we see subtitling? Okay, we've got Netflix, YouTube, films, documentaries, cinema, TV programs. I can hardly keep up. Scandi Noir, yeah. TV, English language, social media, football games, opera. Opera's a really good one, yeah. Subtitles in banks and building societies. Thank you for that one. TED Talks, yeah. The news, audio description. It's for the blind and partially sighted, but something a bit different. Videos and apps. Great, thank you. Really great ones. So let's see if we've missed any. Let's see what I've got on my slide here. Okay, films. We've got films, we've got TV, we've got YouTube and other online streaming services. We've got video marketing, which somebody did say. So in the old days, 2019, when we used to go to perhaps an exhibition like the language show used to be before we had to be online, or when we were in a busy place, maybe in a trade show or in some kind of possibly in a train station, even a busy, noisy place, we see monitors with video marketing and video marketing with subtitles. So subtitles happen for video marketing too. E-learning, so we have subtitles when we do courses online. And somebody said in a building society or bank, thank you for that, because hardly anyone ever gets that one. So my picture is supposed to represent a doctor's, because in my doctor's, they've got a screen, again, because they don't want the sound and to be noisy, they have the subtitles on. So doctors, waiting rooms, dentists, hospitals. If you go and give blood, you quite often you'll see that the television's on, the subtitles are on, or there's a promotional video. The opera, thank you to whoever said the opera. Yeah, the ones in the subtitles in the opera are actually have a different name. They are called surtitles. And those of you with Latin will realize that they're called surtitles because they're above the screen. They're on the top of the screen, or rather above the stage, rather than being on the bottom of the screen. And I have one last thing, which is Netflix, of course, where we all see subtitles. Good. There's a very special place that we see subtitles that you may not know about. And obviously we can't do this right now and we can't sit that close to people as in the picture. But if you have a look at the link or if you Google smart caption glasses, you can now have subtitles at the theatre on a special set of glasses that you wear over your own glasses if you wear glasses. And therefore people with hearing loss, the deaf and hard of hearing, to enjoy performances at the National Theatre, and they're also going to roll them out for translation as well. That's just a little extra place where we see subtitles. Okay, now it's time for hand raising. Let me get my screen right so I can see. So the first question is, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, not yet, to a question that I'm going to ask. So I'm going to lower everybody's hands that's now raised. So I hope, okay, so raise your hand if you watch English programs with English subtitles. And I can tell you, I'm going to write this down. So we've got 420 people here. And of those 420 people, Still raising, still raising, still raising. English programs with English subtitles. 220, 227 people. 229 people watch English programs with English subtitles. Very good. Okay, I can lower you all, so I'm going to lower you all. So it doesn't seem to work. Maybe it just takes a long time. If you can lower your hands, that's it. Okay, raise your hand now if you watch non-English programs with English subtitles. Obviously, you might raise your hand to all of these questions. That's fine. And it's going up and going up and going up and going up again. Even more. 283 people watch non-English programs with English subtitles. And lastly, I need to lower your hands. Put your hand up if you watch programs with subtitles. So English original programs with subtitles in your own language. So programs that are made in English and you use subtitles in your own language. Not quite so many. Interesting. 107 people. Okay, I can see lots of questions in the Q&A about recordings and slides and not being able to stay for the whole time. That's all fine. You will have access to a recording of the session afterwards. I was told that they will be available within the hour, which is quite, given the size of the event, is actually quite impressive. But so those of you that need to access it afterwards or need to go, that's fine. You will be able to access the recording after the session. I don't know how, I'm afraid. I suspect that you will probably be able to access them on the website where you registered. But if not, there'll be someone there that can help you. So I hope that helps some people, that answers some people's questions. Okay, so there are two types of subtitling, two fairly different variations on a theme, which I sort of touched on in the slide before. So there is interlingual subtitling and intralingual subtitling. And it's quite difficult sometimes to hear the difference. So interlingual subtitling is where there's translation involved. So that's where you're going to be watching a program in English with subtitles in a different language, or a program in a different language with subtitles in English, or a program in a different language with subtitles in yet another language, of course. And then intralingual subtitling is where there is no translation involved, at least no translation between languages involved. There is translation between the audio and written language. And that's also sometimes called subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing. So the two types of subtitling are can be dealt with quite separately, although they have a lot of similarities. Let's have a look. Okay, so the main differences between the two types of subtitling, as I said, translation subtitling is translated. So interlingual subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing is normally same language. In translation subtitling, we have to bear in mind that we're expecting our audience to be able to hear. So we don't need to tell them who's speaking. But in subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, we do need to somehow indicate who is speaking. Excuse me. So there are a couple of different ways that can happen, and I'll show you in a minute. One way is through what we call speaker labels, so literally labeling the speaker. And another way is through the use of colour, but I'll show you that in a sec. In translation subtitling, we don't specify any sound effects on music because, again, our viewers can hear. So they can hear the sound effects. They can hear a door slamming. They can hear music. They can hear a shot, for example. They can hear the rain. But subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, we need to indicate that these things are happening so that our viewers know what's going on. In interlingual subtitling, translation subtitling is normally only 2 lines, almost always. So that's quite a good sort of red flag. If you're watching something that you somewhere that you where you see it's translation subtitling, but there are more than 2 lines, that will tell you that it's not professional. It hasn't been done by a professional. And usually translation subtitling is white. The text is white. Subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, we can have more than 2 lines, and we quite often do have more than 2 lines, as on the slide before you will see. Oh, hold on one sec. Okay, can't do that. But you will have seen that there were more than 2 lines there. Subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing is still usually or often created by translator subtitlers. So subtitlers that are working on translation subtitling might also work on subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, but it's also produced through a method called Respeaking, and I will talk about that in a little while. So here's an example of speaker labels. And this is a screenshot from an animated trailer, actually, an advert. And very simply, the boy is saying it's fun, the girl is saying, what we like best. So that's telling us who is speaking. Sometimes you'll see that they're within square brackets. Sometimes they are closer to the mouth of the person who's speaking, but that's a speaker label. The other way that you will see speakers indicated, and you can see by the age of the 2 actors in this screenshot, anyone that's familiar with this program, that it's quite an old screenshot. So the other way that who's speaking is indicated if we don't use speaker labels is through the use of colours. And this is what you'll see on the BBC. If you ever watch anything on the BBC and you put on the subtitles, there are only 4 colours normally used for speaker identification. And that I wrote them down, and now I can't find the piece that I wrote them down on because I can never remember them. White, blue, yellow, and green. There we go. And I wrote down the order in which they come. And now here they are. Okay, so the way that functions is that the first person who speaks is subtitled in white. The second person who speaks is subtitled in green. The third person who speaks is subtitled in blue, and the fourth person who speaks is subtitled in yellow. And the person keeps that colour all the way through the programme. And then they start again. So the 5th person that speaks gets white, etc., etc., etc. And this seems to work quite well, although it's a little bit counterintuitive. So here you can see that Phil is talking in blue and Ian is talking in green. So who works as a subtitler? Who becomes a subtitler? Okay, and I'm talking particularly here about Western Europe. I'm aware that in other parts of the world it's different. So students that follow a classic academic route, you can do a master's in audiovisual translation, you can do a master's in translation that contains subtitling modules. For example, the one that I teach on contains a module in audiovisual translation where you'll get some subtitling training. You can that's a really common way for people to become subtitlers, a classic academic route. There's quite a lot of people that work in subtitling who are on their 2nd or 3rd career, in the same way as there is with sort of translation, text translation. So sometimes people come to it from careers in film. People come to it from careers in translation, and then they retrain as subtitlers. They're usually people that love film and love language. So these are obviously the 2 things that you need, particularly because subtitling is not particularly well paid. So it is something that you need to be passionate about and to want to do with your time. And in fact, people, as you'll probably know, people will do it for free, and they do it as a hobby as well, which is a whole other conference session, I think. Amateur subtitling. As I said, translators that want to diversify sometimes move into doing some subtitling. Yeah, they might be looking around for other strings to their bow. And anyone that was in my last session, well, we were talking about that in there. Subtitlers need to have translation skills, of course, if they're going to do interlingual subtitling. They also need very good editing skills, but also technical skills. Subtitling is quite a technical art, if that's not an odd phrase. To be able to subtitle, you need to be comfortable with technology, and you need to be comfortable with using software and handling files. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a sec. Just check the time. So how do we subtitle? So to subtitle is really simple, not to subtitle, but a subtitle. So the actual entity of a subtitle. It's a really simple thing. It is just a piece of text and what we call a time code. And that's what a subtitle is, or a subtitle file is a sequence or a collection, a sequence certainly of text and time code. Text is what the actors say, edited, and time code tells the broadcast software when this text should be displayed. So your job as a subtitler is to produce a file that the broadcaster or the streaming provider or the platform or whoever, the production company, can use that will provide the text of the subtitles, but also what we call the in time and the out time, when the subtitles come on the screen and when the subtitles go off the screen. So the subtitler's job is to listen to the audio or look at the script, but also listen to the audio because it doesn't always match the script, to edit the text, to translate the text. If we're doing translation subtitling, we don't edit it beforehand, obviously, to set the time codes and also to review the file. And we have to edit the text because the human brain cannot process text through reading as quickly as we can process it when we hear it. So there's no way that if we put all the text onto the screen that the actors are saying, that the average person will be able to read it in the time available. Plus also, we don't want to spend the whole time when we're watching a subtitled movie looking at the subtitles, do we? Because we want to look at the movie. I mean, somebody's spent a huge amount of time and money creating this beautiful set of moving pictures. So we want to be able to understand the dialogue, whether that's because we can't hear or because we don't speak the language, and also look at what's going on. So the subtitler needs to make the subtitles as concise as possible. So that's what we do. This is a screenshot from a type of subtitling preparation software. We use preparation software, specialist subtitling preparation software to subtitle. So you'll see there's lots of different types of subtitling software and they range from being free to being very expensive. They all should show you the film, which is here, and they all have a place for text, which in this case is here. And they all have a place where you can set the in time and the out time. Here's a different one. This is a web-based one. Again, you can see where I've written text here. That's where your subtitle would be. You can see that that is also appearing on our screen in front of the other text. So that's not very good placement. And you can see that our time code is also there, showing the software when to bring the text on and when to remove the text from the screen. What about sports and news then? What about things that happen really quickly, that are live, where there's no preparation, where we don't know what people are going to say? So talking now about subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, intralingual subtitling is also sometimes called captioning. And that is done using a method called Respeaking. So the way that works is that somebody, the subtitler or the respeaker, will listen to the broadcast. So for example, football commentary, say, and they will respeak that audio those words in subtitle form. So they do the editing in their heads in subtitle form into a specialist software which uses something like Dragon Naturally Speaking, but some kind of speech recognition software. But it's not just that, it's also the subtitling software as well. So speech recognition to produce subtitles that are then broadcast. So that job, the job of Respeaker, is a bit like a combination of interpreter, simultaneous interpreter, and subtitler. And now, in fact, there are people who are being trained to do that with translation as well, so that they produce live translated, live interlingual subtitles. As you can imagine, it's very cognitively stressful, so it's not something you can do for very long, in the same way as you wouldn't want to be simultaneously interpreting for very long. Wanted to share with you, this is a little bit old, but it's a classic Respeaking mistake, because obviously the speech recognition software cannot differentiate between homophones. I know that horse and horse isn't quite a homophone, but it was obviously a bit too difficult for the Respeaking software. So it should have been horse, as in GG horse. So the next time you see a mistake in English language subtitles, especially if it's news or sport or something that's live, ask yourself, is that a speech recognition mistake? And more often than not, it will be. So don't blame the subtitler, it wasn't their mistake, it was the mistake of the software. So how do we get work, or how do we get ourselves in a position to get work? There are internships. Even now, there are remote internships. You can get an internship with a subtitling company. You can get an internship with a dubbing studio. There are courses. So I talked already about postgraduate courses. There are also courses, MA courses. There are also short courses. In the old days, we used to do them in person, but they're also online, and they were online before we all had to go online, so they're designed for online. Subtitling is offered by pretty much every translation agency now, and I would encourage you to try and encourage other people to use specialist subtitling companies if they are needing subtitles, because it is a specialist skill, and some translation agencies do offer it without really knowing what they're doing. Some do know what they're doing, and some outsource it to specialized subtitling companies. But there are subtitling companies, very large ones, in fact, international ones, that offer subtitling services. It's easier to get work now because we often use what's called the template method. And just really briefly, because I really want to spend quite a lot of time answering your questions, the template method is for translation, usually from English, not always, but usually into many languages. And the way that works is that a template, or sometimes it's called a Genesis file, an English subtitle file is produced for the English content, not for the deaf and hard of hearing, but actually to use as a source text for the translation. And that usually means that subtitlers don't have to necessarily engage with the timing process, with the process of setting the time codes in and the time codes out. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they can just work within the skeleton that they've been given, the template file, which makes it easier for those of you that are working from English to get work as a subtitler. You still need to know about subtitling rules and to know about editing, but you don't necessarily need to engage with the timing skill set. Okay, so now I'm going to look at your questions. 26 questions. Okay. Oh, some of them are questions to my question. Okay, so I train with WinCaps, but as you probably know, it's quite expensive. Is there a particular free subtitling software that you suggest? Thank you, Francesca. I don't recommend free software. It's not very good, usually. It depends what you're going to use it for. I mean, excuse me, if you're going to use it for subtitling your son's school play, then it's absolutely fine. If you're going to use it for paid work, then you need to pay for software. You don't, however, need to buy WinCaps, because WinCaps is expensive. There are less expensive software that does the job just as well. So there's the subtitling software called Easy Titles, EZ Titles. There's one called Spot. They seem to be the sort of best bang for your buck. The one that I showed in the second slide is one called, it's from a company called Una with 3 O's. And theirs is cloud-based, and it's I think you can buy it on a sort of rolling monthly basis. It's not as user-friendly as WinCaps, so it will depend on how many minutes of subtitling you're going to do. But don't forget that if you're a freelancer, you can offset any software that you buy against tax. But I do appreciate that WinCaps is expensive. So try and go somewhere in the middle. Not free, not super expensive. I hope that helps. Let's work my way through. Okay, so that's also so Natalie's asking what specialist software would I recommend? Well, so there, yeah, I mean, I can't really personally recommend Easy Titles or Spot because I haven't used them. I have used the Una tool. I have used free subtitling software, which I'm not even going to mention because I really don't think it's very, very good. So I wouldn't suggest that you do that. Also, don't use subtitling software which is for video editors because you'll be there forever. So things like anything within Adobe Creative Cloud, for example, I think there's subtitling in there. Anything that's just specifically for video editors, that it's not set up for mass subtitling. So don't do that. Samantha wants to know, do you need to be qualified translator first? I would say so. You certainly need to be able to translate. It's there's kind of 2 bits to that question. Is it, will you get work and can you do it? I think if you're not qualified and you don't have translation skills because you've been a translator for ages, say, you won't be able to do it anyway. If it's about getting work, if you're an existing translator and you retrain as a subtitler, then perhaps you might get work if you have experience. I should say that you can get pro bono experience, so working for nothing experience. You can subtitle TED Talks, for example, and there are other things that you can also do that will show that you have some subtitling experience. Okay, let me see. How do you know what to edit out? That's a really good question. That's Louisa. Well, that's the skill. That's what one of the skills. That's what you have to be trained to do and have experience in. But in a nutshell, you need to think about what's essential for the story, for the people that you're translating for. So you have to see the film as a whole. So you have to think, will my character say that? Would they say it in that way? And have I got everything in there that is necessary for the person that I'm doing this for, who perhaps can't understand any of the source text? If you imagine if I was watching a film in Korean, for example, I wouldn't be able to even understand anything. Is there enough for them to be able to understand it? But it's a skill. It's a skill, so that you need to learn. Hold on, what else have we got? Can you dictate your subtitles using voice recognition software? Yes, you can. You can, absolutely, just as I said that the Respeakers do. So yes, you absolutely can. You would need to probably buy one of the higher end subtitling software packages because Dragon or other speech recognition software doesn't interface with subtitling software. But if you did that, then you definitely could, yes. As a translator, I'm occasionally asked for SRT files of subtitles. What's the best free software you recommend for this? Just pick one. Just pick one. I don't think it makes any difference. If you're just converting, it doesn't really make any difference. The 2 sort of most common free subtitle software packages that I'm aware of are AGSub and Subtitle Workshop. So either of those will probably do the job, but be careful. I mean, I have had it happen to me, not for a while because I no longer use free software ever, but I had it happen to me in the past that I converted subtitles and that they've gone totally awry because I've used freeware. Okay. So I think I probably answered the question, Laura, about the mistakes. It's, well, It's a good question. So Laura's question is, when I see intralingual subtitles on the news, I often notice mistakes. Is that because they're generated by a machine, or is it a human being who's very pressed for time? Okay, so the mistakes on the news are down to speech recognition software usually. However, you may also see mistakes in interlingual subtitles, subtitles with translation. They may well be because it's a human who's very pressed for time, or they might be somebody who's not properly trained. Both of those things happen. Okay. When did subtitling start? That's a really good question. Oh goodness, that's in my PhD. If you want to Google my PhD, which is deposited at UCL, it's in there. I don't know the date off the top of my head, but it's quite a long time ago. There's a lady called Carol O'Sullivan who is an academic. She's at the University of Bristol. She's an academic in the history of subtitling, and she's written quite a lot about the start of subtitling. But it's sort of grew out of silent films, out of the do you remember in silent films the panels that are in between that showed what people were saying before there was sound. So in a way they were kind of the first subtitles. Gosh, I have 62, and I know they're not all questions, but there are 62. I'm doing my best. Okay, let me see. Do subtitlers charge per line, by the word, or per hour? Really good question, the answer to which is neither, none of the above. Subtitlers charge per minute. So per minute of film, per minute of footage. So a company will pay you for how many minutes there are in the film that you're subtitling, basically. And as I said, the rates of pay are generally very low. If you want, I noticed that there's a question about rates, which I really can't answer because they're so variable. Depends on the language, it depends on the source material, it depends on the country that you're working in, depends on your client. People are generally quite cagey about rates, but Netflix, for example, they publish their rates. So if you have a look at Netflix, you should be able to find their rate card. And those are the rates that Netflix recommend that agencies pay to their subtitlers. They don't always, but most reputable companies will pay the Netflix rates for Netflix work. So you can have a look. I think off the top of my head, it might be $6 a minute. But please check that because I might have forgotten that. Yes, there are rules about, this is Yorik's question, there are rules about how many words are allowed in one row because otherwise it wouldn't fit on the screen. So normally it's sort of between 36 and 42 characters. We count in characters per line. So yeah, each client will have a set of guidelines that will be laid down. So it'll be different for different clients, but it's very rarely more than 42, and it's very rarely less than 36. So somewhere between 36 and 42 characters per line, and that includes spaces and punctuation as well. But good subtitling software you'll be able to set it up so that it tells you. You don't have to count them. It will tell you how many characters you've got per line, and you can set up a limit, and it will tell you when you're over that limit. Somebody here is recommending Subtitle Edit. Andrea, thank you. Says they've tried lots of free softwares. They think that Subtitle Edit is the best of the free software. So that's a good recommendation. Does it have to be in a particular font? It used to be really important what font it was in, but now generally the client will change it anyway in transmission. But sometimes clients will specify a font. Yeah. Just to go back to the pricing, the other thing that I forgot to say was there's also quite a flourishing corporate subtitling market. So things like promotional films that are shown at trade shows, or internal communications or external communications for websites, and that is paid better usually than broadcast subtitling, but it's also usually not quite so interesting. When I do my longer training sessions, I talk a bit more about my own experience, and I've done a lot of very, very dull subtitling. For example, a well-known burger chain, or a sort of dishwasher manual, or a health and safety video, or quite memorably actually a very, very long video, I think 90-minute video, which was to do with share dealing software. So it's not all big Hollywood blockbusters. This is a great question. Thank you, Inaz. How much time does 60 minutes footage take to subtitle? Okay, so if you're doing translation subtitling with timing, you will very rarely be able to do more than 30 minutes in a day. So 30 minutes of footage of film will take you a day to do. So you can work out then what your daily rate of pay is at $6 a minute. It's not really very much at all. So yeah, 60 minutes is going to take you at least 2 days, probably longer, including reviewing. So 3 days. If you're doing a documentary, then so just check the time. If you're doing a documentary that requires a lot of research, so if you're doing a documentary, for example, for say the Discovery Channel, then it could take you a lot longer because you're going to have to research all the terms and all the names for everything. Got lots of is dubbing similar to subtitles? No, not really. Dubbing is quite different. Dubbing requires you to adapt the translation to match lip movements. There are similar techniques for editing subtitles, condensing subtitles, as there are for adapting to lip movements, and they're taught in the same course because in the industry they are usually handled by the same companies. Let's see, what else have we got? Courses or qualifications in subtitling. I'm not recommending any. That would be unethical of me, but you know where I work, so there are pick a subtitling course from a reputable university. If you can't do a master's course, then you can access online courses. You can access short courses. Yeah, but make sure that it's somewhere that has a good reputation. Subtitling software for Mac. Oh, that's a perennial. So the one called Una that I recommended, that one is cloud-based, so that works on a Mac. That's the only one I know of, but I think there are more, but not many. The big names that have been sort of established for decades, none of them work on Macs, I'm afraid, which is really weird because creatives use Macs. But yeah, what else have we got? How do you convey variations in accent, non-standard language, and interlingual subtitling? That's a really interesting question. Again, people have written whole PhDs on that, and I've got 1 minute. Well, normally, often you don't, but if it's plot crucial, then you have to use punctuation and spelling. So there's a really lovely French film. The English title's Welcome to the Sticks. I'm not going to say the French title because my French is rubbish, but that's basically turns on the guy's accent, and they've done it quite nicely in the English subtitles. So have a look at that, or you could have a look at if you think about the novels of Irving Welsh and how he renders the Scottish accent. That's sort of how we would do it in subtitling if we had to, but if we can avoid it, we don't do it. But yeah, so we wouldn't do it, for example. I was about to say we wouldn't do it for EastEnders, but actually I've seen in EastEnders that they sometimes do. They sort of say, you didn't really mean that, did ya? And you'd write the ya as ya rather than you. So yeah, it's a really interesting and quite complicated topic. How do we convey non-standard language and accents? I'm looking for my last question. Goodness. Do you need any subtitling experience to do an internship with a company? No, you don't. However, internships with companies can be quite competitive, so it's really handy if you do have experience, even if it's pro bono, so voluntary. And companies will want to see that you are passionate about subtitling. So when I was involved in picking interns, we would always look for people who said that they enjoyed films and were specific about the types of films that they enjoyed. And when they came to interview, we would ask them, what was the last film you saw? What did you think of it? What films do you like? What directors do you like? Because you need to be really passionate about the industry to work in subtitling. And I think that's my time up. So apologies. So there were 86 open questions. Apologies for those of you whose questions I didn't manage to answer. I'm going to just quickly, if I can, write in the chat my email address, which was on the front. I can send the slides to anybody that wants them. I'm absolutely happy to send the slides out. So please do send me an email if you want the slides. And otherwise, good luck and enjoy your subtitling. Thank you for coming.